Please note, this will be a review of Splatoon 3's single-player campaign, not of the overall multiplayer aspects. In short though, they're good. I like Splatfests, Salmon Run is fun during big runs, and that's the only time I play. Anyway, on to the review. The Splatoon series started during Nintendo's most recent dark period. The company managed to lose all of its goodwill with the release of the Wii U in 2012. During the 5 short years before the launch of the Nintendo Switch, the only thing they could do, other than support the wildly successful 3DS, was to push out good games for their failed home console. And to be frank, Nintendo did exactly that. While the console itself, and by proxy the games, didn't sell well, their quality was never an issue. So much so that most were ported to the Switch so larger audiences could have a chance with them. Mario Kart 8, Pikmin 3, Super Mario 3D World, Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, all among those re-released on the much more successful console. One notable exception was 2015's Splatoon. As such, it's by far the least played of the trilogy. I myself, a proud Wii U owner, never even picked it up. My only experience with it was a couple of matches at a friend's, but despite low sales, the game, by all accounts, was very good. Some criticized the fairly linear single player and the low number of multiplayer maps at launch, but most were just impressed that Nintendo EAD was able to put together such a tight, child-friendly, third-person shooter, a genre hitherto untouched by Nintendo. Despite its success, or perhaps due to its flaws, Splatoon was not released on the Switch. Instead, Nintendo EPD developed a full-fledged sequel with 2017's Splatoon 2. While I had barely any time with the first, it was more than enough to make Splatoon 2 a day one purchase, and I had a great time. I love Pearl and Marina, the couple of single-player levels I tried were fun, and competing against everyone during the Splatfests was a blast. In fact, fairly quickly the only thing keeping me returning to the game were the big Splatfests. I never bought the DLC, never tried any other game modes, just played, and sucked, at Splatfests. Then the Splatfests stopped, and I stopped playing. Well, sort of. Nintendo EAD released the Octo expansion DLC in 2018, ran the final Splatfest in 2019, then spent the next 3 years preparing for Splatoon 3 in 2022. A month before its release, I was there defending my boy Big Man during the demo Splatfest, and once again bought Splatoon 3 on day 1. But then, the completionist in me cracked. I looked at the entrance to the Splatoon 3 single player, closed the game, opened Splatoon 2, and fully completed it. Then I bought the DLC, and fully completed that too, all within a 3-week span. One would think that after spending so much time in Splatoon 2, I'd be a bit burnt out. Instead, the opposite was true. Sure, the base Splatoon 2 campaign was only just okay, and completing every level with every weapon was a slog, but Octo expansion revitalized me and then some. The tighter experience, the innovative levels, the cleaner UI, the banging music, Pearl and Marina, not to mention the wonderfully improved completion process. The DLC was such a step up from the base game. I had fallen so completely in love, I couldn't wait to see how Splatoon 3 innovated on that experience. Splatoon 3's campaign begins similarly to Splatoon 1's, so I'm told, and Splatoon 2's. In this case, the player follows the now former Captain Cuttlefish through a sewer grate, is dubbed the new Agent 3, and is tasked with searching for the Great Zapfish, the being that powers the nearby city, Splatsville. Soon they realize their small fry friend, Lil Buddy, is able to ingest this new icky and furry paint like goop after being powered up by salmon eggs. Salmon? 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 After a very neat twist, the fuzzy goop breaks open a latch that Cuttlefish, Agent 3, and Lil Buddy are on, abducting the old captain and mooring the new agent in the land of Alterna. Upon waking, they meet up with the new Squidbeak Splatoon, now including Callie, Marie, and the new captain, the former Agent 3, and together they're tasked with exploring this strange, underground biome in search of Cuttlefish and the origin of the strange new furry ink. But watch out, this mysterious trio is also on the hunt, the trio obviously being the new idol group Deep Cut. From here on out, the game is an excellent combination of Splatoon 2 type overworlds with Octo expansion styled levels within. There are 6 areas to explore. At the start, a couple levels are available, with more requiring Lil Buddy to eat the fuzzy ink to access. The bigger the fuzz, the more eggs it costs to consume. 3 of the areas contain a signal that could be where Cuttlefish is being held, so the goal is to explore each island and get enough eggs to reach the 3 different signals. Of the levels, the easier ones are usually placed on the path towards the exit or the signal, with more difficult ones being more sequestered or behind particularly pricey goop. Outside of levels, a series of collectibles can be found. Sometimes Little Buddy will notify you of an invisible capsule buried in the ground. They're unlocked with ink and contain either some music, extra eggs, items to power up gear, and documents that contain cool art and some really intriguing lore, including this one with Pearl and Marina. I miss Pearl and Marina. The levels themselves are truly excellent. Each was designed similarly to those from Octo Expansion, but given their own unique twists. There's usually 2 or 3 weapons to select from, and each level only takes at most a couple of minutes to complete. They all have fun challenges, from smashing all the boxes to navigating a maze full of enemies, finding all the keys, or just getting to the end, and they're all balanced perfectly for the allotted weapons. Plus, some have the player only using the weapon ults like the grabby hand or the craft tank or the big hammer, which were especially exciting to play through. The story is told through 3 main mechanisms: cutscenes, inter-level dialogue, and unlockable lore snippets, and I enjoyed each for what they were. The main story, that of searching for Cuttlefish, plays out as one might expect, but as the game moves into its final act, there are some really cool moments that had me jumping in my seat, especially so with the final boss. Even more especially so with the final portion of the final boss. Truly excellent stuff. It does run into the shonen problem, where each world-ending situation is worse than the previous world-ending situation, so where the Splatoon story will go from here will be tough, but future events won't take away from the highs this game reached. And the real draw of the story is the dialogue anyway. Listening, or reading I guess, to our primary characters talk to one another as Agent 3 battles and platforms through levels is always great. At this point, Callie and Marie are fully realized characters, and it was always a joy seeing them converse and tease one another while cheering on Agent 3. And a gag I never got tired of was the captain. The captain never spoke. Instead, they tell Callie and Marie what they want to say, and then Callie and Marie tell Agent 3. It was funny to me every single time. The lore was also incredibly well written. As Agent 3 beats more levels, the history of Alterna and of the last humans on Earth is slowly unlocked. It tells a heartbreaking post-apocalyptic storyline of humanity's last-ditch efforts at surviving. It's wild that something this bleak is hidden inside of a children's game. Super rad though. I found the overworld exploration to be a huge improvement over the Splatoon 2 campaign overworlds, and a very welcome addition after the Octo expansion's level select menu. There was something incredibly satisfying covering every last surface with ink, finding secret collectibles as I went. It was horrifying then, when I took a pause from the single player, only to come back and find all the ink was gone. But the exploration felt like a fun twist on Super Mario Sunshine, but instead of cleaning, I was painting, and exploring every nook and cranny for collectibles was actually useful, instead of netting another blue coin. The balloon popping mini puzzles were also well done. They usually had Agent 3 create a path through the whole area in a race to pop them all, meaning I had to be familiar enough with a level, have had ink thrown down already, and be quick enough to get the balloons before they floated too high. While exploring the areas was the icing on top, the actual stages were the bread and butter. In Octo Expansion, each level required a certain number of salmon eggs to even enter, and upon completion, many more would be rewarded. But the DLC levels cost almost too much. Having to retry one a handful of times would put me at risk of bankruptcy. Splatoon 3 fixed this by making entry costs significantly lower, by a factor of 10 in most cases, but keeping the reward values still high. The higher costs put a lot of undue stress on some already difficult levels, and in 3 I was able to solely focus on overcoming some equally tough challenges. Speaking of tough, levels with multiple weapons were a very natural way of increasing level difficulty. Each had a recommended weapon that would generally be the easiest to use, and a harder weapon that maybe didn't have as much range or do as much damage. And since each level only had up to 3 weapons and was only up to 3 minutes long, completing each was so much more manageable. Splatoon 2 was daunting, requiring 5+ minute levels to be beaten 8 separate times with every weapon. Octo Expansion already fixed this, but I'm so relieved 3 not only continued it, but made it that much more satisfying. But I do gotta say, after beating a level, we're treated to a really good jingle while Agent 3 poses for the camera. But like, sometimes it's like, jeez Nintendo, this is a kid's game. You don't need to show that much midriff. Woof. Of the weapons though, I've definitely realized I like some a lot less than others. I prefer long-range weapons like the bucket or the splat dualies, so challenges that require the brush or the roller were never my favorite. This isn't necessarily a critique of those levels, they work for the ones they were designed for, I just don't like them as much. The new weapons, the Splatana and the Tri-Stringer, also weren't my favorite, but had some good challenges designed around them as well. I especially enjoyed when the game required me to properly aim the explosions that occurred after a fully charged Tri-Stringer shot. And while I don't like the craft tank during the multiplayer battles, the stages designed around it and the other ult moves were always a blast, especially the grabby hand levels. Zooming through the level and blasting enemies apart was great. I won't spoil most of them here, but Splatoon 3 had a very fresh take on bosses this time around too. Those from Splatoon 2 and Octo expansion got fairly old fairly quickly, and it was nice to see Nintendo EAD go a different route with the bosses this time around. But I do need to talk about this one boss specifically. So if you'd like to not be spoiled on it, jump to this timecode, listed on the screen or in the description. Because as a lifelong Super Mario Sunshine fan, when I encountered the Big Man boss fight, it blew my mind. It's just the Manta Ray fight from Serena Beach. They did that. It's literally just that. It was so cool. My jaw was dropped the whole time. Speaking of bosses, while I certainly don't want to spoil where it goes, the end of the game goes places. The climactic battle is equal parts wacky and epic and made for a fantastic culmination of an already great game. Plus the final boss remix rocked. Speaking of music, Splatoon continues to be one of the GOATs. Not every track did it for me. I found the hub world themes fairly boring, even after unlocking the music tracks for them. But for the level themes, when they hit, they hit. I couldn't stop my body from moving with the rhythm. Made some of the levels a bit harder, to be honest. Lastly, Splatoon 3 did one of my favorite things a game can do. For lack of a better term, there is a Grandmaster Galaxy equivalent that acts as the greatest challenge. A single level split into 4 segments with some of the most difficult platforming and combat in the game. The first and last sections were especially tough. Luckily between each section is a checkpoint, so as I died over and over to the Octolings in the final combat arena, I didn't have to restart all of it. That is, until I got up for a walk, stretch my legs, come back to the challenge with a clearer mind. When I tried to resume, the game crashed. So I did have to restart after that, and then I had to play it again for this footage, so I had to go through it 3 times, I guess. I loved Splatoon 3's single player. Great music accompanies very fun levels with really good and calming exploration in between each. Nintendo EAD has mastered designing levels to jump and shoot through, and I cannot wait to see what they come up with for the DLC. Plus, I really miss Pearl and Marina, so I'm excited to catch up with them again. Overall, I give Splatoon 3 a Lil Buddy out of 10. I love Lil Buddy with my whole heart, I would die for them. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you've played the Splatoon campaigns in the comments. If you haven't, you really should, they're good. And while you're here, if you'd like, maybe leave a rating on the video and subscribe if you'd like to be notified of more of the things that I put out on the channel. If you'd like to read more of my thoughts, you can follow me on social medias where I'm at Mario8th everywhere. Links to them in the description. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.